Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Anna, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend Mark. How's it going, Mark?
Doing great, Anna. I'm really excited about today's topic. I was at a networking gala last week, and I realized how many people struggle when someone says, "So, tell me about yourself." It's like they suddenly forget their own name. They look like a deer in headlights.
It's the blank page syndrome. It's such a broad, open-ended question that people don't know where to start. They either give a 5-minute monologue about their childhood or just say their job title and stop. It creates this awkward silence that is so hard to recover from.
Exactly. And for our upper intermediate learners listening today, this is the perfect chance to use some nuanced vocabulary. You don't want to just sound fine. You want to sound articulate and poised. You want to show that you're a competent communicator from the very first second.
Poised, great word. It means calm, confident, and in control. So, Mark, what's the first rule of introducing yourself like a pro? Is it about the facts or the feeling?
I think it's all about the hook. Instead of just stating your name, you need to provide a little bit of context that sparks interest. Think of it like a movie trailer. You don't show the whole film, you just show the most compelling parts to make the audience want more.
I love that analogy. Most people treat an introduction like a deposition, like they're giving evidence in court. I am 30 years old. I live in Madrid. I work in sales. It's factually correct, but it's incredibly monotonous.
Right, it lacks substance. A pro hook should connect your name to a why or a how. For example, instead of "I'm an accountant," you could say, "I'm an accountant who specializes in helping small startups navigate their first year of taxes." Suddenly, you aren't just a guy with a calculator, you're a consultant and a problem solver.
That's a huge shift in perception. You've gone from a generic category to a specific niche. It makes you much more memorable. I often tell my students to avoid dictionary definitions of themselves. Don't tell me what your job description says. Tell me what you actually accomplish on a daily basis.
Precisely. Another thing about the hook is the delivery. You have to sound like you actually enjoy what you do. If you say a great hook, but your voice is lethargic, the message is lost. You need to radiate a bit of enthusiasm.
Lethargic. That's a good B2 word. It means lacking energy or vitality. No one wants to hire or befriend someone who sounds bored by their own life. So the hook is really about engagement. It's the bridge between a stranger and a potential partner or friend.
And remember, the hook isn't just for you to talk. It's to give the other person a handle to hold on to. You're giving them a cue to ask a follow-up question. If you provide a boring intro, you're actually making the other person work harder to keep the conversation alive.
That's such a generous way to look at it. Being a pro at introducing yourself is actually an act of courtesy. You're making the social interaction easier for everyone involved by being clear and intriguing. Well, we've all heard of the elevator pitch, right? It's almost a cliche in the business world now. The idea is that you should be able to sell yourself or your idea in the time it takes to ride an elevator, usually about 30 to 60 seconds.
Right, but the mistake people make is thinking it has to be a rigid, scripted sales pitch. If you sound like you're reading from a manual, people will immediately tune out. It's not about being a salesman, it's about being concise and impactful.
That's a crucial distinction. When you're too rehearsed, you lose your authenticity. For our learners, the challenge is making the pitch feel spontaneous, even if you've practiced it 50 times in your head.
Exactly. A pro pitch should have a clear structure, but enough flexibility to change based on who you're talking to. I like to think of it as a modular pitch. You have your core identity, and then you swap out the details depending on the audience.
Modular. I like that. It's like Lego blocks. You keep the base and change the top. To make it sound professional, you really need to use active verbs. Instead of the passive, "I am a manager," which is a bit static, try saying, "I oversee a team of 10," or "I spearhead digital marketing projects."
Spearhead. That's a classic B2 level power verb. It means to lead or initiate something. It sounds much more authoritative than just saying, "I started." It implies you were the driving force behind the project.
Another great one is coordinate or implement. If I were introducing myself at a tech meetup, I wouldn't just say, I make apps. I'd say, Hi, I'm Anna. I specialize in UX design, specifically focusing on making interfaces more intuitive and accessible for elderly users.
See, that's way better. You didn't just tell me your job title, you told me your expertise, your target demographic, and your value proposition, all in one go. You've defined your why.
And value proposition is a term our listeners should definitely know. It's the unique value or benefit you provide. If you can't explain your value in 2 sentences, you probably haven't refined your pitch enough.
There's also the pain point strategy. You identify a problem and then position yourself as the solution. You know how small businesses struggle with social media? Well, I create automated systems that handle their posting so they can focus on their customers.
That's a brilliant way to frame it. You've identified a hindrance, something that holds people back, and showed how you remove it. It makes you an asset, not just another person looking for a job or a connection.
But you have to be careful with the length. If you go over 60 seconds, it's no longer an elevator pitch, it's a presentation. You want to leave them wanting more. You want them to say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
That's the hook we talked about earlier. The pitch is the bridge that leads to a real conversation. It's the catalyst. If you do it right, the rest of the conversation flows effortlessly.
So for everyone listening, try writing down your active version of your job today. Replace I work in with I facilitate or I streamline and see how much more dynamic you sound.
Now, Mark, we have to talk about adaptability. This is where many people trip up. You can't use the same intro at a casual Friday barbecue that you use in a high-stakes boardroom. If you do, you'll look either too intimidating or too unprofessional.
Definitely. Context is everything. It's about reading the room. In a social setting, the primary goal is to be approachable and relatable. If you're too formal, if you start listing your certifications while someone is handing you a burger, you come across as stiff and perhaps a bit pretentious.
Stiff and pretentious, two great words for our listeners. Stiff means you lack natural movement or warmth, and pretentious means you're trying to impress people by acting more important than you are. So in a social setting, how do we bridge that gap without losing our professional identity?
I like the present, past, future model, but it needs to be softened with personal touches. For example, I'm currently living in London working in finance, but I actually grew up in a small town in Italy. I'm hoping to travel more this year, maybe even do some hiking in Scotland.
I love that. You've given them 3 hooks to grab onto: your job, your heritage, and your hobbies. It invites a multitude of follow-up questions. If you just say, I work in a bank, the conversation usually hits a dead end right there. The other person thinks, okay, do I ask about interest rates now?
Exactly. You've hit on a key point. Conversational generosity. By sharing a bit of your background or your future goals, you're making it easy for the other person to connect with you. It shows you're well-rounded.
Well-rounded, meaning you have a variety of interests and experiences. But what about the professional side? When we move into a networking event or a business lunch, how does the tone shift?
In those settings, you want to be polished but still human. You move from being relatable to being reliable. Instead of talking about your hiking trip first, you lead with your current mission, but you should still avoid sounding like a LinkedIn profile.
Right. You might say, I've spent the last 5 years in renewable energy, and lately I've been really intrigued by how AI is optimizing solar grids. It's professional, but intrigued shows you have a personal, intellectual interest in your work. It's not just a paycheck for you.
Intrigued is a much more sophisticated way to say interested. It suggests a deeper level of curiosity. And notice how that intro sets you up as an expert without you having to say, I am an expert. It's subtle.
That subtlety is the hallmark of a pro. You're not selling, you're sharing. Whether you're at a wedding or a conference, the goal is to find common ground. In a social setting, the common ground might be a shared love for travel. In a professional setting, it might be a shared industry challenge.
And don't be afraid to pivot. If you realize you're being too work-focused at a party, you can say, but enough about the office. I'm actually trying to learn how to cook Thai food this weekend. Do you have any tips? It shows you have emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, or EQ. It's the ability to perceive and manage your emotions and the emotions of others. A pro knows when to talk shop and when to talk shopping. We've been talking a lot about the right words to use, but since this is a pro introduction, we absolutely have to discuss nonverbal communication. You know, Mark, they say that over 50% of our communication is actually through our body language, not what we say.
It's true. It's a bit intimidating when you think about it. You can have the most sophisticated vocabulary in a perfectly crafted elevator pitch, but if you're looking at your shoes or fidgeting with your keys, no one will believe you're a professional. Your body is basically shouting that you're nervous.
Exactly. It's about congruence. That's a fancy way of saying your words and your body should be telling the same story. If you say you're passionate about a project, but your face is expressionless, there's a total disconnect. You lose credibility instantly.
So let's break down the essentials. First, there's eye contact. In most Western professional cultures, eye contact signifies honesty and confidence. If you avoid it, you might seem shifty or disinterested. But you don't want to stare. That's just creepy.
Right. You need to aim for soft eye contact. It's a balance. And then there's posture. I always tell people to imagine a string pulling them up from the top of their head. It opens up your chest and makes you look assertive rather than defensive.
Assertive, another great word. It means having or showing a confident and forceful personality. When you stand tall, you naturally project authority. And let's not forget the hands. What do we do with our hands, Anna? I see so many people hiding them in their pockets.
Hiding your hands is a classic sign of anxiety. Pros use open gestures. When you use your hands to emphasize a point, it actually helps your brain process words faster, and it makes you appear more transparent to the listener.
I read a study that said people trust those who show their palms more than those who keep their hands hidden. It's an ancient evolutionary trait. It shows you aren't carrying a weapon.
That's fascinating. And then there's the mirroring technique. Have you heard of that?
Oh, definitely. Mirroring is when you subtly mimic the body language of the person you're talking to. If they lean in, you lean in a little. If they're speaking calmly, you match their tempo. It creates a subconscious sense of rapport.
Rapport. That's an essential B2 word. It means a close and harmonious relationship in which the people understand each other's feelings or ideas. But the key word you used was subtly. If you copy every move they make, it looks like a comedy sketch.
Right, it has to be discreet. And finally, we have to mention the smile. Not a fake customer service smile, but a genuine one. A real smile reaches your eyes, what scientists call a Duchenne smile. It signals that you are a safe and friendly person to engage with.
It's the ultimate icebreaker. If you look like you're suffering while talking about yourself, the other person will feel apprehensive about continuing the conversation. But if you look like you're enjoying the interaction, they will mirror that energy.
So the takeaway here is that your body prepares the ground for your words. If your body language is inviting, people will be much more receptive to your professional hook. Let's get into the danger zone. Even if you have the best body language and a killer hook, there are several blunders that can totally sabotage your first impression. Anna, what's the #1 mistake you see?
Without a doubt, it's rambling. I call it verbal clutter. It happens when someone is nervous and they just keep talking, hoping that eventually they'll say something interesting. If you've been talking for 2 minutes straight and haven't let the other person speak, you've lost them. They've already started thinking about what they want for dinner.
Verbal clutter. I love that. It's like you're making the listener do the work of filtering out the garbage to find the gold. A pro is concise. They say what they need to say, and then they stop. They allow for silence.
Silence is so powerful. It gives the other person space to process what you've said. Another huge pitfall is being too vague. If someone asks what you do and you say, "I work in business," or "I do stuff with computers," that means absolutely nothing. It's almost a dismissive answer.
It is. It shows a lack of initiative. It's much better to be specific. Even if your job is complex, find a way to make it tangible. Instead of, "I work in logistics," try, "I make sure that products get from the factory to your front door as fast as possible."
Exactly. Use concrete examples instead of abstract concepts. Now, here's a big one for our English learners. Over-apologizing. I hear so many people start their introduction with, "Sorry, my English isn't very good, but..."
Oh, that's a detrimental habit. It immediately puts you in a position of weakness. It highlights a negative before you've even shared a positive.
Exactly, it's a confidence killer. The truth is, most people don't care if you make a small grammar mistake. They care about the clarity of your ideas. When you apologize for your language, you're essentially telling the listener, focus on my mistakes, not my message.
Well said. Just be assertive with the English you do have. Another pitfall is the me trap. This is when the introduction feels like an interrogation where you are the only one answering. You need to avoid being narcissistic.
Narcissistic, meaning extremely self-centered. A pro introduction is balanced. You should be looking for a way to transition the focus back to the other person. If you don't show curiosity about them, they won't feel a genuine connection to you.
And we can't forget about jargon. We touched on this briefly before, but it's worth elaborating on. Using too many technical terms or acronyms makes you sound like a textbook, not a human. It creates a barrier between you and the listener.
Right. If you work in AI and you start talking about hyperparameter tuning and convolutional neural networks to someone who works in human resources, they will feel alienated. A true pro can explain complex ideas in layman's terms.
Layman's terms, meaning simple language that anyone can understand. It's actually a sign of higher intelligence and deeper understanding if you can simplify a complex topic.
Lastly, I'd say avoid being too transactional. If it feels like you're only talking to someone because you want something from them, a job, a lead, a favor, people will sense that ulterior motive.
Ulterior motive. That's a great B2 phrase for a hidden reason for doing something. It makes the interaction feel insincere. You want to build a relationship first. The transaction comes much later.
So, to summarize, don't ramble, don't be vague, stop apologizing for your English, and keep the jargon to a minimum. If you can avoid these stumbling blocks, you're already ahead of 90% of the people out there.
Now we're getting to the flavor of the introduction. Using the right adjectives is like adding the perfect seasoning to a dish. If you only use words like good, hardworking, or nice, your introduction will be bland.
Bland, exactly. It means lacking strong features or characteristics and therefore uninteresting. For our upper intermediate listeners, this is the quickest way to demonstrate your linguistic proficiency.
You want to swap those overused words for something more precise. Let's start with a classic, hardworking. Almost everyone says they are hardworking. It's become a bit of a cliché. Mark, what's a more sophisticated alternative?
I love the word diligent. It implies not just working hard, but working with great care and thoroughness. If you tell me you're a diligent researcher, I immediately picture someone who doesn't miss the small details.
That's a great one. Another one I hear a lot is, I'm good at my job. Instead of good, why not try proficient or adept? If you say, I'm adept at managing complex budgets, it sounds like you have a high level of skill and experience.
Adept, that's a high-level word. It suggests a natural talent combined with practice. And what about flexible? People love to say they're flexible, but it can sound a bit vague.
How about versatile or adaptable? Versatile is fantastic because it suggests you can turn your hand to many different tasks. I've had a versatile career moving from sales into project management. It shows breadth.
And instead of saying that you're organized, you could use the word methodical. It sounds much more strategic. It suggests you have a system or a logic behind what you do. I take a methodical approach to solving technical issues.
I also really like the word proactive. It's a favorite in the business world. Most people are reactive. They wait for a problem to happen and then fix it. A proactive person anticipates the problem and prevents it.
That's a massive selling point. If you describe yourself as proactive, you're telling an employer that you're a leader even if you don't have a leadership title yet.
Let's look at social adjectives too. Instead of saying you are friendly, you could say you are personable or approachable.
Personable is a lovely word. It means having a pleasant appearance and manner. It's perfect for roles that require a lot of interpersonal interaction.
And for those who work in creative fields, instead of creative, try innovative. It suggests that you are not just making art, but you are creating new methods or ideas that have practical value. Here's a little tip for the listeners. Don't just use these words in a list. Don't say, I am diligent, proactive, and versatile. That sounds like you're reading a dictionary.
Good point. You have to incorporate them into your story. In my last role, I had to be quite versatile because I was handling both client relations and back-end data. Now the adjective is serving the story rather than just being a label.
Exactly. It makes the vocabulary feel organic. When you use these words correctly, you don't just tell people you're an upper intermediate speaker, you demonstrate it. One thing that really separates the pros from the amateurs, and this is a bit of a secret sauce, is mentioning your motivation. It's not just about the what or the how, but the why behind what you do.
I couldn't agree more. This is what I call the passion factor. In a world where everyone has similar degrees or job titles, your underlying motivation is what makes you memorable. It's the difference between a resume and a human story.
Right. Think about the difference. If I say, I'm an English teacher, it's a fact. It's fine, but it's static. But if I say, I'm an English teacher because I'm passionate about empowering people to find their voice in a global community, that carries so much more weight.
Empowering. That's a powerful B2 verb. It means giving someone the authority or power to do something. When you use a why like that, you aren't just describing a job, you're describing a mission. It shows you have a vision that goes beyond your monthly paycheck.
And it's not just for altruistic jobs like teaching or nursing. You can have a why in finance, tech, or even construction. For example, a software developer might say, I love coding because I'm driven by the challenge of streamlining complex processes to save people time.
Streamlining, meaning making a system or organization more efficient. That's a great way to frame it. It shows that you care about the end user. It makes the person you're talking to think, wow, this person actually cares about the impact of their work.
Exactly. People are naturally drawn to those who have a sense of purpose. It creates a level of trust. If I know why you do what you do, I feel like I understand your integrity.
And let's be honest, it helps you stand out in an interview. Most candidates focus on their credentials. I have this degree, I worked at this company, but the candidate who says, I transitioned into marketing because I've always been fascinated by the psychology of consumer behavior is the one the manager remembers.
Fascinated. Another step up from just interested. It suggests an intense curiosity. Now, some people might worry that sharing their why sounds a bit too sentimental or cheesy. How do they avoid that, Anna?
That's a valid concern. The key is to keep it grounded. You don't need to say you want to save the world if you're just fixing printers. You can say, I take pride in solving technical headaches so that my colleagues can work without frustration. It's honest, it's professional, and it's still a why.
Grounded, meaning sensible and realistic. I think that's the perfect balance. You're connecting your daily tasks to a larger objective. It shows you aren't just a cog in the machine.
A cog in the machine, a great English idiom. It refers to a person who is a small, unimportant part of a large organization. By sharing your why, you prove that you are an engaged and thinking individual.
It also helps bridge the gap between your professional and personal life. If your why is rooted in a personal value, like a love for innovation or a commitment to sustainability, it makes you seem more authentic.
And authenticity is the ultimate currency in networking. People don't just buy your skills, they buy into you as a person. So, for our listeners, what is the core reason you get out of bed and go to work? If you can articulate that in one clear sentence, you're officially introducing yourself like a pro.
So, you've given your intro, you've shared your hook, mentioned your why, and used some sophisticated adjectives. It was perfect. You feel a sense of relief, but now what? The silence that follows can be incredibly nerve-wracking.
That's where the pro move comes in. You have to throw the ball back. A professional introduction isn't a speech, it's a dialogue. If you just stop talking, you're basically forcing the other person to do all the heavy lifting to keep the conversation going. You should always end with a reciprocal question.
Reciprocal, meaning given or done in return, it's an essential concept for our upper intermediate learners. By asking a question, you show that you're attentive and not just self-absorbed. But you have to be careful. You don't want it to feel like an interrogation.
Right. Avoid boring, closed questions like, and you? Or what do you do? Those are fine for beginners, but a pro uses open-ended questions that invite a deeper story. For example, that's a bit about my background, but I'm curious, what's the most rewarding project you've worked on lately?
Rewarding. That's a much better word than just good. It asks for an emotional and professional connection. Another great one is, I've told you about my journey into tech, but I'd love to hear what inspired you to join this industry.
Oh, I love that. It mirrors the why we talked about earlier. You're essentially inviting them to share their passion. It shifts the dynamic from a formal exchange of facts to a genuine connection.
And what if you're in a social setting, Anna? You can't exactly ask someone about their industry inspirations while you're standing near the snack table.
True, in social settings, you want to be more versatile. You could say, but enough about my work. I'm actually quite new to this city. What's one place around here that you'd consider a hidden gem?
Hidden gem. That's a fantastic idiomatic expression for something that is excellent but not well known. It's a great way to show you're open-minded and interested in the other person's local knowledge.
Exactly. And notice how that question is complimentary. You're subtly acknowledging that they have expertise or taste that you value. That's a very charismatic way to follow up.
One common mistake I see in the follow-up is not actually listening to the answer. Some people are so busy thinking about their next clever English sentence that they totally disregard what the other person is saying.
That's a huge red flag. If your eyes are darting around the room or you're nodding mechanically, you're not being a pro, you're being insincere. You have to practice active listening.
Active listening. That means fully concentrating on what is being said rather than just passively hearing the message. You can show this by using continuer phrases like, that's fascinating, or I see what you mean, or how did you handle that setback?
Setback, meaning a reversal or check in progress. Asking about challenges shows you have a high level of empathy. It makes the other person feel heard and validated.
So the follow-up is really about momentum. You've started the engine with your introduction, and the follow-up is the fuel that keeps the car moving. If you do it well, the conversation becomes effortless.
And remember, if they give a short answer, don't panic. Just pick one word they said and elaborate. If they say they like marketing, you can ask, what specific aspect of marketing appeals to you most?
It's all about being a detective of interests. A pro is someone who makes the other person feel like they are the most interesting person in the room. Well, Anna, we've covered the what and the why, but now we need to talk about the how. Do you think people should actually practice their introduction in front of a mirror, or is that a bit too much?
It might sound cringeworthy, that feeling of being slightly embarrassed by your own actions, but yes, it is absolutely essential. Or better yet, record yourself on your phone. When we speak, we have a very different perception of how we sound compared to how others actually hear us.
That is so true. The first time I recorded myself, I realized I had these nervous tics. I was touching my hair and saying every 5 seconds. It was a real eye-opener.
We call those filler words. Pros try to minimize them to keep their speech concise and streamlined. When you use too many fillers like or like, it creates interference. It makes it harder for the listener to grasp your main point.
And it's not just about the words, it's about the cadence, the rhythm of your speech. If you speak too quickly, you seem anxious. If you speak too slowly, you might seem unprepared or even bored. You want a steady, deliberate pace.
Deliberate. That's a perfect B2 word. It means done consciously and intentionally. You should also pay close attention to your intonation. In English, if your voice goes up at the end of every sentence, what we call uptalk, you sound like you're asking a question or seeking approval. It lacks conviction.
Right. You want a falling intonation at the end of your statements to sound more certain and authoritative. It tells the listener, I know what I'm talking about. Another thing to practice is the transition between your name and your hook. It should feel like one smooth movement.
I also suggest practicing the smile in the voice. Even if you're on a phone call or a Zoom meeting with the camera off, if you smile while you speak, your vocal cords actually relax and you sound much more genial and welcoming.
Genial, meaning friendly and cheerful. That's a great tip. And what about stress? I don't mean emotional stress, but word stress. In English, emphasizing the right syllable or the right word in a sentence can completely change the meaning.
Absolutely. If I say, I am a project manager, it sounds standard, but if I say, I am a project manager, it sounds like I'm correcting someone. Pros practice where to place the emphasis to highlight their key strengths.
It's almost like a performance, isn't it? But you have to make sure it doesn't look theatrical. It still needs to feel like you, just the most polished version of you.
Exactly. I tell my students to find a role model, maybe a speaker or a podcaster they admire, and try to shadow them. Not to copy their identity, but to understand their tempo and how they use pauses for effect.
Pausing is such an underutilized tool. A well-timed pause before you say your why can create a moment of anticipation. It makes the listener lean in. It shows you are comfortable with the space you are taking up.
That's the definition of presence. When you practice your delivery, you aren't just memorizing lines, you're building muscle memory. So when the high-pressure moment arrives, your brain doesn't have to work so hard. You can just be present with the person in front of you.
So the takeaway for today's practice is record, review, and refine. It might be uncomfortable at first, but that's where the growth happens. We've certainly covered a lot of ground today, Anna. From the initial hook to the technicalities of word stress and falling intonation, it's amazing how much strategy goes into a 30-second introduction.
It really is. But before we wrap up, I want to emphasize one final point. Consistency. You can't just be a pro for the first 30 seconds and then let your energy drop for the rest of the meeting. The introduction is the gateway, but you have to walk through it with the same level of professionalism.
That's a great point. It's about maintaining that momentum. And speaking of consistency, don't be afraid to reiterate your key points later in the conversation. If you mentioned you're proactive in your intro, make sure your stories later on actually exemplify that trait.
Exactly. Exemplify, meaning to be a typical example of. It's about showing, not just telling. Another final tip I have is to keep a success journal. Whenever you have a great interaction where your introduction worked well, write down what you said.
I love that idea. It helps you identify your winning formulas. And on the flip side, if an interaction felt awkward, don't dwell on it. Just analyze what went wrong. Maybe you used too much jargon or forgot your reciprocal question, and adjust for next time.
Dwell, to think or speak about something unhappy for a long time. Definitely don't do that. Social skills are a perpetual work in progress. Even native speakers have off days where they feel clumsy with their words.
Clumsy, meaning lacking grace in movement or in speech. It happens to the best of us. The goal isn't to be a perfect robot, it's to be a compelling human being. If you can combine these professional structures with your unique personality, you'll be unstoppable.
Well said, Mark. To our listeners on Daily English Dialogues, remember that your voice is your most powerful tool. Use it with intention. Practice these words: adept, proactive, versatile, diligent, and make them your own.
And don't forget to check the video description. We'll put a summary of today's power vocabulary and some templates you can use to start building your own pro introduction today.
Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure sharing these tips with you. If you found this episode insightful, please hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our future dialogues.
We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Write your elevator pitch below, and we might even give you some feedback.
Until next time, keep practicing, stay curious, and keep speaking.
See you in the next one. Bye, everyone.